and and things were very good. I was born in the 1950s, which was really a rough time for which was really a rough time for black people, blacks in general. I lived there, so my childhood was good. But I'm going to talk about my parents' childhood, and this is by no means uh, a, a discussion of of things that they did. I love my parents dearly. They're both deceased, and it's their story. To me, their story is is a good one. It's a good story. It's a story of how you can take your childhood traumas, don't have to define who you are and what you become in life. You can overcome them. And my parents overcame their childhood traumas um, when black people did not have have a basic have a way to go to therapy like all the things we have now. They took their trauma, they let go of their trauma, and and their trauma just they let go of it, and they spoke of it, but neither, in my estimation, neither spoke of it negatively. They had it. They discussed the things they didn't like about growing up, and they would tell us that things that they did for my sister and myself that they, as kids, they didn't have. You know, I'll start with my father. He was born September 20th, 1908, at the beginning of, in the 1900s. His uh, his trauma is he had five siblings, four sisters, one brother. He was the youngest boy. He was the youngest boy because he had one brother and four sisters. They were um, they were they were they were his mother. He was born to a white father and a biracial mother in 1908, Virginia, in 1908, during the height of the Jim Crow era. And they were given, him and his siblings were given away. And all of them got nice homes. They were adopted out. And they got they were adopted out, and they all got decent homes. My father's the place where my father was put, the home he was put into, wasn't, they weren't that nice to him. And he speaks about it sometimes. And he was mistreated. He he was taken out of school at in third grade. He didn't go past the third grade in school. He got his first pay. He started working in the on the farm. He lived on a farm. He worked on a farm. He started working at the age of 3. Got his first paying job at the age of 10. Things like that. And his life was not that easy. And he never really took my grandmother, and he never really talked about her. And he would say certain things about how you know what kind of mother, but he never really seemed to bother him or his siblings. They were all adopted out, and when they got older, they found each other. And my father were, he he was who he was, and he didn't complain about it. And he regretted not having a mother. He regretted not being able to go to school, but it didn't make him a bitter person. Now, my mother, she was born she was born June 22nd, 1910, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. In North Carolina, she, my grandmother was young. She was abandoned. She was born 21 years after slavery, so there was some doubt of whether my grandparents, my great grandparents, were because it was 21 years after slavery. They're not sure whether my grandmother, was abandoned, or whether she was, you know, or whether she was abandoned by her parents, or whether her parents were recaptured, or whether they were re, you know, they were put back into slavery. No one really knows about it. And my mother, my mother, she had 3 children. She was not married, and she wasn't married at that time. She was not married to my mother's father. She married, but it was her. It was my grandfather is my mother's stepmother. The grandfather that I heard about was my my grandmother's husband, who was not my mother's father, and she was saying, certain things about how he was very mean to them when they were kids. And my aunt would tell me story. She was the youngest of 3 children, and so her life wasn't that easy. And as a teenager, I I questioned my mother because my mother was overly protective of me as a child. Overly protective of me as a child. And, she was very, and she revealed to me, I was like, I didn't understand, excuse me, I didn't understand a lot of things that my mom did. Like a lot of things that I just didn't understand a lot of things that she she was saying to me. And I used to say to my mother, I was like, "Ma, I didn't understand when I asked her, like, for example, when I was growing up, the kids would go together and see the teen shows, the concerts and stuff. And that's 16 or 17, and I always wanted to go, and no, you can't go. I don't know, it was in New York City, so, oh no, you can't go. And I never understood, and I questioned her. I said, I'm not, I don't want to do anything. I just want to hang out with my friends. And I'm not the type of person, and I wasn't the type of person who followed childhood traumas, the things that other people did. I never followed things like that. I always thought for myself. I was not a follower, so um, I just didn't understand why she wouldn't allow me to do certain things when I was growing up. And she told me that she was SA'd when she was younger. She was getting ready to tell me who it was, but she never did. She never told me. But from what I assume, and I think it was, I don't know. I can't say for sure because she never told me. But I feel that it might have been her stepfather, my step grandfather, that uh, essayed her when she was younger. I don't know for sure, so I can't say it for sure, but it's just a feeling you got. Now, I'm going to tell you how their childhood traumas, how I feel that, I want to talk about it, how childhood traumas, how when you have a trauma as a child, and I'm basing this on my parents. My life was not traumatic. It was typically, at that time, it was considered a white girl lifestyle. Coming from a biracial father, a milk, a biracial father, and and the brown skin, soft cream colored brown skin, uh, black woman, fair skin, what they called fair skin. It, it just, our lives were really good because at the time we lived in a house when most black people lived in rented apartments. They didn't really own anything. And so I'm going to talk about how, excuse me, oh, you know, how you can overcome your your childhood traumas, and it can shape into it can shape you into it can transform you to into who you are, and how you can it can transform you. If you do the work, it can transfer you into something good. Your trauma, and I've learned your trauma does not have to define the rest of your life. My parents, their childhood traumas made them who they are. I think it made my dad a great husband, a great provider, and and you know things for his wife and stuff. He was very he was a very good father, good husband and stuff. It just you know both my parents turned their childhood traumas into things that made their lives easier. My mom the uh, broke the chain. There's family curses. I think we all have some family members that family things. A lot of us have it. We may just push it under the rug and never deal with it. But my mother overcame her childhood trauma because um, she made a conscientious drive to break the family curses that developed in my family and her family on her side of the family. She chose to be married. She would not have a child until she was married. She didn't do that. And she was determined that her children would go to school, would finish school, because none of her sister, she didn't finish school, and her sisters didn't finish school. So that was the top priority of my father and my mother. My and my mother she chose to she chose to prioritize that, and prioritize that her children graduated school, and just in general. because, like I said, she told me she was SA'd, and she didn't tell me who it was, and she overcame it. And I think the trauma of her childhood made her the mother she was, and the trauma that my father faced when he was growing up made him an excellent husband and a good father. You know, he was, a true, not an educated man, but he worked tirelessly for his children. He he took it. He didn't let it define him. While it hurt him, it did not define who he was, and what he became in life. And the things that the things that I know was that he was not, excuse me, he was not, it did define him, and he could have been any type of person. He could have been a bitter person, but my dad was not bitter. My mother was not bitter, and my father was not bitter. And you can actually, you can cure, I don't say cure because I don't think it's a disease, but your childhood trauma does not have to define your whole life. It doesn't. It really doesn't have to. People allow their traumas from their house, and I'm sure there's you know there's some trauma that runs deep, but if you work hard on it, you can overcome. You can overcome your childhood traumas. My parents did it, and this is, you know, they overcame it. I was told that these are things that I was told about my parents that I never saw that part of them. I was told about my father. He was a drinker. He wouldn't work, and he met my mom, and he married her, and then and they were about to break up because he wouldn't work and things like that. And then my mom became pregnant with my sister, and once he had a kid, it was like it was a transformation because his intent was to be a better father than his father was to him. And he did. And my mother, she chose to end her trauma by being a better mother, by being married, by being being married. That was her thing, because that was her trauma of being not my grandmother not being married to her father when they were born, when her and her sisters were born. So those kind of things, those little things they did. My mother became ill when I was like 10 months old. My dad worked, came home, took care of the house, cleaned, cooked for my sister and myself when I was younger. And eventually, my grandma, my mom's mom, came to live with us to help out. And he, having a child, made him change his ways, grow up, start working, and you know, and it made him become the father who he was to my sister and myself. So it really, so his trauma shaped him with his quest to be a better man than the parents he had. And it worked in there. And it just, you know, it in my estimation, it made them good parents. I was blessed to have two parents. My father, he trusted my mother enough, and I didn't understand this at the time, but he knew my mother was a good woman. He trusted her enough to allow her to stay home, and she, to run the household, and to take care of my sister and myself. And he trusted her because, as he said, he found a good woman, and he took care of her. And my mother set the rules for us, and I never understood why she was so protective. Why she didn't want to let she didn't want to let she she just, I don't know. I just felt at the time, I just felt like she didn't want to she just wanted to hold me back, because it was like I actually wasn't allowed to do a lot of things the other kids did. I didn't go to public. I didn't go to the public school with most of my kids. I went to a Catholic school, and she gave art lessons. My mother loved to draw. She had applied for an art scholarship to a college in Ohio, I think it was. I'm not sure, but I think it was in Ohio. I forget the name of the school, but I know she said she applied for it, and she never got the letter. She wrote a letter and asked about the scholarship, but they had sent it, and she always believed that her stepfather took the letter and didn't tell her. When she found out, when she inquired about it, and you have to realize that back then they didn't have emails where you could get an answer the same day. So she waited, and they said they had fulfilled the spot that she had, saying that she was going to accept the accept the scholarship to the college, the art college that she wanted to go to, and she lost it. And her stepfather took it, got the letter, and never gave it to her, and that was her trauma. So when my sister and I were growing up, my sister had ballet and tap. I had tap and gymnastics, which I was lousy at. I, I had no interest for it, and I definitely had no interest for art, piano playing, and I learned how to play the piano because we had a piano at home. Everything, to make children happy. And my dad, his thing was Christmas. We had big Christmas. My mom literally got mad because my dad went to he went to a place called Beneficial Finance Company. You could go and get loans, and he took out a loan for $1,500 to buy Christmas stuff for my sister and I. And she said never ever again would she do. She was so mad with him, but my dad, he was like anything to make his girls happy. My mom and myself and my sister, to make us happy. And it's those little things that I tell their child. They could, and I look at it and I hear so much on the internet about people. They don't like their parents. They blame their parents, and not saying that people didn't have trauma, because nobody's going to say that, that it didn't happen, because in reality, we may think things didn't happen, but we honestly don't know. So we can't really criticize. We only know what people share with us. And But if your childhood is not happy, you have to work to put it put it on. You have to work to to really really overcome it. Like I said, my parents overcame their trauma without ever going to a therapist, and and having a therapy session. They overcame it because they worked it out themselves, because they each wanted to be better than the life. They wanted a lifestyle better than the lifestyle they came from. The home life they had when they were at home. Uh, uh, my father being adopted into a family who really didn't care for him. They they needed the people who adopted him. He was like another. It was another source of income, because at the time my father grew up, and he grew up on a farm. It was the more kids you had, the more things could get done. And like tobacco, because Virginia is a tobacco country. North Carolina and Virginia were tobacco companies at the big tobacco industries at the time. I think it was R.J. Reynolds and whatever. But those companies were the big companies, and the people worked on on the tobacco farms and things like that. And my father didn't feel he got a fair shake, but he was very, you know, but he was very adamant about his children. And I always called him a gentle giant. He um, he didn't anger too quickly. He would take a lot of stuff, and I used to think he was weak, and I did. I thought he was weak. I thought he was a weak person, and it's crazy. It's really crazy how, when you're a kid, how you think when. And now that, like I said, now that I'm older, now that I've experienced motherhood and all the joys and downfalls that it goes with, and stuff like that. But his trophy, he left home. Uh, Both my parents were part of the black migration the migration of blacks to northern cities, looking for a better job. My mother, however, she her older sister went to work in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and when my aunt got a job and everything, and she sent for my mother and them. So my grandmother's house, my aunt had a son, and my grandmother's house was accidentally set on fire by by my mother's nephew, and the house burnt down. And being in the South at that time, they literally let the house burn. All the houses were wooden then, so that did it. And my mother decided to come north to work with her sister to get a job and get the money to rebuild, because this happened in 1927 or 28, I believe. But I know it was right before the Great Depression and stuff. So my grandmother, they came north to help my grandmother to save money and buy things for her and bring it back home, and to fix up wallpaper and things to fix the house up. Then the Great Depression hit, so, they sacrificed a lot, and they used their childhoods and became very prosperous. Like I said, they owned a home, which most black people didn't do. I don't remember this part too much, but they had a car, and different. My sister told me they had a car, and when she was born, that she remembers my mom driving and stuff. My dad didn't really drive because he was learning to drive, and he almost accidentally something happened, and he almost killed somebody while he was driving. And that shock of that, he never wanted to learn to drive again. He just didn't care about driving. But my mom drove and things like that. But they overcame the childhood. And my mother, she overcame the essay in her life. She didn't hold it, she didn't let it, I don't know how to put it. She didn't let it, she overcame it as far as she didn't let it define her who it is, who she was. It didn't define who she was and who she became. She was raised, her intent was to raise good, nice, excuse me, it was to raise nice children and things like that. And so she did. And her thing though, her trauma, it made her overprotective for her daughters. You know, we never spent the night at anybody's house. We never did spend the night at anybody's house, not even at my aunt's house. We didn't do that. So it it sounds crazy, but your childhood traumas doesn't have to define who you are. And I see on the internet how people say that they don't like their mother. They would spit on their mother's grave. They don't care about their mother. It's just like foreign to me. It's like a foreign language they're speaking to me, and I see it, and I know that people handle trauma differently, but you know, they handle it differently than most people do, and but it made my life miserable to a certain extent, you know, and to a certain extent it made my child life miserable because, when you're growing up, you want to, you don't understand when your parents tell you something, and when they say you can't do what you want to do, uh, you don't understand it. I hope I'm explaining this right because I'm older now. I experienced my own son. I went through the teenage years with my son, and I understand how how parenting is not easy. It made her so strict. I think overly strict. Then again, I feel it was that she was being overly strict, and things, because of her trauma as a child, her being essayed as a child. She wanted to shield her children, especially myself, because I'm her youngest, and I was kind of headstrong. I was a headstrong type kid. I would talk back. I would just, I was just that girl. I always had to have the last word. I always wanted the last word. If she said no, I wanted to know why. And she didn't feel she needed to give me an explanation because, and it was because I am the oldest, and I know, and I know that, I'm the mother. I say no, that all that's matter. I don't have to explain why I said no. I'm saying no. That type of thing. And that was how, and I didn't realize until much later that she was dealing with her trauma in the way she knew how, if that makes sense. That's what my mom was doing, but uh, her childhood trauma made her hell bent on making sure her daughters, it didn't happen to her daughters, you know. So, as like I said, as I became adult and went through motherhood, I understand things better now, and I wish as a child I could have, you know, experienced it so I would be, I could, I would be able to, you know, I would have been a different child, I think, if I had known some of the things I know now that I didn't know then. And so it does, the trauma does affect you, but you have a choice and you could work those things. Uh, those things are just it makes sense. But once you become a mother, it makes sense that you understand it when it makes it's hard to explain. It's really, really, really hard to explain. You know, so it is. But that's what I think her trauma did to her. It just made her be overprotective of things, and for me, it was hard for me to accept because I was not boy crazy. I liked boys, and I used to laugh at a lot of stuff. But you know, so you know, I laughed at a lot of things that I shouldn't. I went a lot of places I shouldn't have gone. But now I understand why she was the way she did. It all came in when she revealed that she was SA'd to me. That it just went into perspective. It got into uh, but you know, much the perspective, my perspective, understanding of why she was the way she was because of that. You know, just because of how she was, uh, you know, how her childhood was, and she dealt with it the way she knew how, and I have respect for my parent for that. I really have respect for her and everything because of that. So yeah, I am. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful now for the parents I had, and and being an adult and older, I understand that my father and my mother, overcame their traumas to give my sister and I the best life possible that they could give us at the time. I hope this makes sense to it because, you know, it makes sense to me now because, like I said, uh, it makes sense that I didn't understand before, but it you know, it just makes sense to me, and I love my parents for that, and I understand how you know, understand how my parents you know how they how they did. I respect everything that they did as a parent because I see it as I, I see it now that it was hard for them, but didn't they did not uh, they did not allow their circumstances to define who they were. No, they didn't do it, and and for that I'm forever grateful for them to have done that because at the time that they came, they lived in the Jim Crow South. They grew up there, and the world was you know, they lived in the South, but the whole world was, you know, afraid of black people. So it pretty much, you know, they pretty much could have said, "Oh, the hell with it," and been whatever. But they were both upstanding, upstanding citizen. My dad never been locked up, anything like that. So, and it uh, it just it just makes me feel uh, it just makes me feel so much, you know, have so much respect for them and everything they went through and the trauma they had, and they overcame their trauma to be good parents. If I was able to go back in time and choose the parents, my parents, I would choose. I would I wouldn't choose anyone different. I would always, you know, I I would definitely choose my mother and father again. I would. I wouldn't want any other parents. So, you know, childhood traumas do not have to define who you are in life if you don't want it to. If you get stuck in it, you can't get over it. You have to learn how to get over it or it will destroy you. I won't say they won't destroy you, but you have to be the bigger person and get over your childhood traumas. And my parents both did that. So I'm going to, I hope that somebody who hears this can listen to it because listen to it and understand what I'm trying the message I'm trying to convey is your childhood traumas do not have to define your life, and you can become successful. And I'm not going to say you're ever going to forget, but it's going to make you always stand strong. And I grew up in a two-parent household where both parents were traumatized as children, you know, and went through things as children that most children shouldn't have to go through. And I thank God for the parents He gave me because, in my estimation, I believe that their childhood traumas made my dad who he was as a man, and my mom who she was through the you know through her being SA'd and how she and it made her uh, be the woman she was and how she raised my sister and I as our parents. I couldn't have asked for any better parents than the parents that I was given. And if I had a choice to go back in time and I could choose new parents, I would still choose my mother and my father to be my parents because they were, despite all their traumas, they were the best mom and dad anybody could ask for. You couldn't get any better parents than the parents I had. That's how I feel. Well, like I said, I hope that this video can help someone to see that life doesn't end because you've been traumatized. If you try hard, you can overcome it. And today it's so much better than it was back in the day because you can go to a therapist to help you work through it. But you gotta work through it. You gotta let go. You gotta let go. As they say, let go and let God. Let go of the trauma and leave it to God. Let God work his way through it and to help you through it because God will there's nothing that you can't do with Christ in your life. So I'm going to say good evening to all, and I hope that someone sees who needs to see this, that it helps you be who you are, become who you can be to the fullest. Good night.